Washington was a slave owner. Was George Washington a slave owner? So will George Washington now lose his status? Are we going to take down, are we going to take down statues to George Washington? How about Thomas Jefferson? What do you think of Thomas Jefferson? You like him? Okay, good. Are we going to take down the statue? Because he was a major slave owner. Now, we're going to take down his statue. So you know what? It's fine. You're changing history. You're changing culture.
He nailed that. Joining me now, Brenda Hafera, Assistant Director at the Heritage Foundation. Brenda, it is President's Day, by the grace of God. Are they still going after the founders in this country?
Unfortunately, I do believe that's the case in certain circumstances. So I recently came out with a report on the tale of three presidential houses: the good, the bad, and the ugly. And that report is on George Washington's Mount Vernon, Thomas Jefferson's Monticello, and James Madison's Montpelier. And the results are decidedly mixed, with Mount Vernon being the good, Monticello being the ugly, and Monticello being the bad, and Montpelier being the ugly. And a big part of that has to do with how much do they talk about the accomplishments of those respective founding fathers, how historically accurate they are, and are they really giving these accomplished men their due?
Okay, so they sounds like they do George Washington's right. That's a good daggone thing. Why are they doing Thomas Jefferson wrong? What are they doing?
Well, Thomas Jefferson, there are no exhibits that are dedicated to his political accomplishments, really. There are a few exhibits at the base of the mountain, if you've been to Monticello, and they're really focused on the building of Monticello and Thomas Jefferson as an architect and scientist, which is all well and good, but it's not sufficient. It's not really what we admire Thomas Jefferson for in terms of what he contributed to this country and to furthering human freedom. And so they don't give dedicated time and space to Thomas Jefferson as a vice president, as diplomat, as author of the Virginia Statute of Religious Freedom, which started the process of separating churches from the state so that people had the freedom to worship in whatever denomination they chose. And of course, he's the architect of the Declaration of Independence. And currently there are no exhibits on the Declaration of Independence at Monticello. And often as you go through, guides will say that all men are created equal didn't mean all, that it meant white property owning men, which is just not true. Men is a substitute for mankind, and the Declaration is something that we look forward to the realization and move towards a greater realization of those principles.
What about James Madison? What'd they do to James?
James Madison is unfortunately the worst case. There are no exhibits currently at Montpelier dedicated to James Madison himself. And James Madison was James Madison was incredibly important. He was our fourth president. He's sometimes described as America's political philosopher because things like separation of powers, checks and balances, those are things that Madison recommends and Madison thinks about so that we don't have to. And he's deemed the father of the Constitution because of those recommendations, because he authored many of the Federalist Papers, which argued for the Constitution's ratification, and he was the primary author of the Bill of Rights. And unfortunately, at Montpelier, those accomplishments are talked about very little and really cast aside. And some of the things that they've chosen to highlight are not historical, but political. For example, there's a video in the basement that shows protesters from Black Lives Matter and contends that there are more defeats in pursuit of fairness and justice and equality than our triumphs in American history.
Wonderful. Brenda, thank you so much. I appreciate you.
It's my pleasure.